What up? Welcome to Homegrown Hustle, where local brilliance takes the center stage. I'm your host, Matt Eickman. Join us every week in celebrating innovation, guidance, and the power to inspire greatness. Let's explore the stories that shape our local business landscape, and together, let's ignite the spark of excellence.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Homegrown Hustle. I'm here with a couple awesome guests. So I'm going to introduce them real quick, then we're going to get into their story and talk about a really impactful concept and topic that really isn't talked about enough. So super excited for it. But I've got Christopher Wong Michaelson. He's a professor of ethics at the Opus College of Business over at the University of St. Thomas. Thanks for joining us this morning. He brought with him Emily Turner, who's the founder of All Square. She is transitioning out of a role over there now, but she described herself as an architect and attorney who fell into social entrepreneurship, which sounds like it should be in a book or something like that. So Emily, Chris, thank you both for coming on, joining us today. Before we dive into all the fun stuff, can we start with a little bit about who you are, how you got to where you're at, and what you're excited to talk about today?
Yeah, well, as you said, I'm a college professor, but I haven't always been a college professor. My first job out of graduate school. So I have a PhD in philosophy. Aren't many things you can do with a PhD in philosophy, but it turns out one thing you can do is you can become a management consultant in New York City if you convince them that you can kind of learn management on the job, and that degree in philosophical ethics is somehow useful to business. So I actually helped launch a management consulting practice within a giant global firm, one of the big four professional services firms in business ethics. And I'll say, and maybe we'll get into this story, that's where I discovered work with a purpose and also work without a purpose. And that probably ultimately led me to want to study that by going back into academia.
That's great. We're going to come back to whatever that epiphany was there. But nice job, Matt. Emily, could you kind of tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah. I think maybe I'm a North Dakota native originally. I spent the majority of my early adult life in different cities across the country. I went to architecture school, maybe a similar thing where that sort of foundation is the basis, I think, for everything I do. I like to say I design because I give a damn. And most people, when they think about design, maybe don't think about some of the things that I've worked on. But whether, it be in law or social entrepreneurship, I think how we design things, whether it's buildings or organizations or sectors, ultimately determines how they function and whether they do good or not. So it's been a non-linear path for me. How it led to All Square and other sorts of things has been very non-linear, but I think that's the through line is I design because I give a damn.
So you said social entrepreneurship. Can we, just for the sake of this conversation, we define that for the audience?
Yeah. For me, it was, so I started a business. It's a nonprofit, but I like to lead with the business side because I don't think that happens enough.
Facts.
And yeah,
100% facts.
Drives me nuts. But it's technically a nonprofit social enterprise. So we run social programs for folks who've been impacted by incarceration. And we run a business. So we generate earned revenue through several different levers, but the main one being we sell grilled cheese through our restaurant and food truck.
And maybe this is giving away the theme of this episode that we all agree on, but this term social entrepreneurship, the dean of the Opus College of Business, Laura Dunham, talks about how all entrepreneurship is or ought to be in some way social entrepreneurship. We shouldn't distinguish between entrepreneurship just for a profit and entrepreneurship that solves a human problem. All entrepreneurship ought to solve human problems.
Love that.
That was deep.
That's what professors do.
Note, perfect. So let's go to the epiphany moment for you where you were talking about work with a purpose and without a purpose. Because really, purpose and like impact in the community. I think if business owners started asking different questions or thinking about how their business can interact with the community besides just the transaction, I think there can be a lot of movement and progress, not just for those businesses, but for the communities that they're all serving. because it's this big ecosystem, right? If it's just transaction, now you're a commodity. And from a business standpoint, that's not a really good place to be in.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that was my mindset when I went into management consulting. And I think it's most people's mindset when they enter the world of work, that they don't just want to do what they have to do in order to make a living. They also want to do something that is valuable for themselves, but also for other people. And my mindset when I went into management consulting out of getting a PhD in philosophy was, I want to make a difference in the real world. And this enormous institution of business is having a huge impact on our world, often for good and sometimes not so good. And I wanted to sort of, I don't know, maybe I was a bit arrogant and egotistical at the time, but I thought I could sort of change the world from the inside. And you need that kind of audacity in order to get into something new. So that's what I thought I was doing. And it was actually really meaningful work. It was my dream job at the time, living and working in New York City, making more money than I ever thought I would make at that point in my career. And as we all know, we spend a huge amount of our waking adult lives at work. And often it felt purposeful, but sometimes it felt like drudgery. And I was in Washington, D.C., living in New York City, where my wife and our 2-month-old baby were on the morning of 9/11/2001. And I was at a client meeting. And I remember thinking, why am I here instead of with my family, who I need, who needs me, in the city where, well, I mean, both cities that we were in, New York and Washington, D.C., were under attack, but I really wanted to be back home. And that's when I started thinking about all these people, 2,977 people, most of whom had gone to work early one day, died at work. Many of them had signed up for work with a purpose. The first responders who were running toward danger when everybody else was justifiably running away. And then people who just went to their ordinary day jobs trying to earn an honest living and who never came home. And that's when I started really thinking about not just my own career and my own purpose, but what can we learn from this tragedy to make the world a better place? And that ultimately ended up being the basis for some academic work that I did with a co-author named Jennifer Toasty Karras, who I ended up co-authoring a book called Is Your Work Worth It with.
That sounds like an awesome book based off of the topic. Did you bring a copy with you?
Didn't bring a copy of it. I should have. I'll give you a
You got to just
copy
travel
later.
with him, Christopher. Just travel with
I
books.
should always have a copy on me.
And then how did that, just so I can kind of connect the dots to how your two paths crossed and how we ended up here. How did you end up in Minnesota at St. Thomas from the book and all that?
Yeah, so that was almost 25 years ago. So a lot's happened since then. One thing that happened was I wasn't really looking to leave management consulting at that point, but obviously this experience had brought into my consciousness just some sense of, I want to make sure that my work is worth doing every single day. And just sort of coincidentally, I got a call from the University of Pennsylvania asking if I'd be interested in a visiting. So that's like a 3-year temporary professorship. And I thought, maybe I should go back into academia. Then I can study what I'm now thinking about. I can write about it. I can teach about it. And that sort of launched my academic career. My wife and I are both from Minneapolis. We moved back here when our kids got to a certain age. And I've been at St. Thomas ever since. And one thing I do here, other than professoring, is I co-direct something called the Melrose and the Toro Company Center for Principal Leadership, which was created to honor the legacy of Ken Melrose, former CEO of the Toro Company, who believed in work with a purpose. And we give an annual award called the Melrose Twin Cities Principal Leadership Award. And this year, we were thrilled to give it to Emily Hunt Turner, who was nominated by some of our students, and we learned more about her, and our board unanimously chose her for the award. That's how Emily and I got connected.
Recent your paths have crossed then.
Doesn't feel like that.
No.
But yeah.
Feels
it's
like
pretty
we're old
recent.
friends.
Yeah. 6 months maybe?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what that award, like what are some of the criteria that go into selection for that award? Because it doesn't sound like a little deal. It sounds like a big deal.
It's a big deal, and it's been around for 5-6 years. And we're still trying to sort of make the criteria more precise, but it's somebody who's a transformational leader who influences or is in the Twin Cities. They can be in business or in the not-for-profit sector, which is not that different, as Emily says, from the business sector. And if you think about the idea of principled leadership, it's sort of a term that I'm still getting comfortable with, because you can be a principled leader and not have good principles. But our award winners have to be principled leaders, meaning they stick to really important moral principles, and they have to be good principles. And of course, the work that Emily is doing in order to improve the lives of people who have paid their debt. And more broadly today, post-founder role of All Square, thinking about how can nonprofits make a more positive impact on society. I mean, those seem to me to be some pretty good principles.
If they ran better as businesses, I bet more of them could have more longevity and ability to make that impact. And that's kind of what we were talking about before we got going, is like your approach to the nonprofit sector as like an entrepreneur-minded individual running it like a business. So can we talk a little bit more about your story and like the founding of All Square and kind of what happened there and where you're trying to go with your next couple months and future, I guess. This is kind of a big conversation here, Emily.
Yeah, let's jump in.
Let's do it.
Just kidding. I'll try to keep it succinct. I think I've learned how to run a good business. I think I've learned a lot about how sort of what levers in the private sector that are being pulled really well can we pull in the nonprofit sector. Frankly, I don't think all the levers we don't want to pull all the levers. We're a different sector with different motivations. That said, there's some things happening. And I think that my understanding of these levers and functionalities came really unexpectedly. So I certainly don't call myself an expert in any of it, but I've learned through doing, really. And All Square was a response. All Square wasn't never meant to be a business, a nonprofit, a grilled cheese restaurant, have a legal revolution component. Like, it was never envisioned as more than anything. Like, it started as a response. The notion that people all across the country, including many people that I love dearly, come home from prison and they're not all square. They'd still have that record that is haunting them forever. I have made a lot of mistakes in my life. I'm fortunate to not have any of them be memorialized by the criminal system. That said, I think in my own way, in my own life, I've also been fighting for inclusion in a lot of different facets. And so I think that between the people that I love that were incarcerated or formerly incarcerated, paired with some of my own journey, there was passion to be involved in making our landscape more inclusive, particularly for folks who have records. So it started as really an idea. And if I'm being real, and I think sometimes it's like, oh, that's so lame, but it was a brand. Like, I think even the initial branding came before the concept of the restaurant, came before the food truck, came before the legal revolution. It was the brand. It was something that says something really important about welcoming folks home when they've returned. And I would say that is one of the things that the nonprofit sector, we have such an opportunity to envision ourselves that, like, every business is a brand, right? And I don't know that we always view ourselves as brand worthy, but brands can be monetized. And the great news is we're monetizing things for really beautiful reasons. Nothing against the for-profit sector and some of the things that are monetized in the sector just for profit. But for me, I'm like, I don't want to be afraid to monetize something that ultimately is feeding beautiful programs. So all that to say, yeah, I'm a designer, I'm a tinkerer. I do have formal training in law and architecture, but I think at the end of the day, I just care a lot about the landscape that we all share. And somehow being in the nonprofit sector has been one of the ways. And now I think moving forward, working in the sector and trying to figure out what we can do as a sector is it's like that extra beating heartbeat that I didn't intend to have, and now it's there. And I'm really fortunate to have met Christopher, because I think when we met and the award came through, it was as I was making a really big transition. I mean, walking away as the CEO and stepping down was very, very emotional for me. But it was time. We have a new leader who's incredible. And this award, I think, and the opportunity to meet Christopher has allowed me to step into a new life.
That's awesome. So All Square essentially is helping to facilitate kind of next steps in the rehabilitation process, which really that's what the incarceration is supposed to do, right? It's supposed to be like a punishment, more or less. You go through and check whatever boxes you have to, and then after that, there's still more recovery or more process to go through. But the limitations that are put there, especially as I'm thinking about it now, just like basic hiring, recruiting processes, it limits a lot of the workforce that's out there from
very much
what they could do. And I know people that run businesses with this as like part of their core purpose is they're helping people, whether it's incarceration or coming out of addiction and rehabbing from that. And they're having some of the biggest impact in these people's lives. And those people are some of the best workers they could ever ask for, right? It's like the opposite behaviors that everyone would expect from somebody that has a resume that they do, right? But when there's no room to demonstrate skill set, ability, the fact that you've grown as an individual, you just keep getting judged by that, that previous version. And I mean, that would be hard to keep coming up against and staying on that path.
Yeah, I think you said the key word, right? Growth. I mean, I think we're all here for growth. And so I think some of us travel through modes of growth that look differently, but there's some types of growth that if they're memorialized, like you don't get to move beyond, that just feels like we're better than that, I think. And I think I know that that's a collective, a lot of people, including a lot of people who helped me get All Square off the ground from a funding perspective. We're from my home state in rural North Dakota, who politically probably don't agree with me on many things, but very much got behind the notion that like, that's not cool. Like, you know, like if we don't get to move beyond our mistakes, what's the point? Not to mention, I have to say this, right, as an attorney who lived and went to law school in Louisiana, I saw forms of the criminal justice system and how it was playing out specific to race that I could never look away from and can never be okay with. And so I would also add that not everyone who's on the inside should be there. And some folks who have sentences are egregiously long that are unacceptably long. And so that's a part of the equation as well that I have to mention.
I can't help but getting professorial here for a second, but I'm thinking back to a book that I read as a philosophy major as an undergrad, Michel Foucault's Discipline and Punish, in which he notes, I think in the book, or at least my professor noted it, that one of the original words for a prison was penitentiary. And the root word of penitentiary is penitence, this idea that we believe that people can apologize for a mistake and grow as human beings. And in this punishment-oriented system, we've really gotten away from the idea that this is a place of penitence.
I would agree, not just in the criminal justice system, I think just in society. Yeah. I think we look at cancel culture and all sorts of, there's lots of shame-driven, punitive practices right now that luckily there's a lot of beauty to live alongside of that, but I think it's playing out in a lot of different forms.
So how should business owners be rethinking about maybe who all falls into their hiring pool? Because the problem of finding people or finding people for staffing, especially with growing organization, it's ongoing. I don't know if that problem's ever going to really be solved, but I think some of it could be like process on the side of the business and where they're looking, what their activities are in terms of that. But it could just be like, who's the pool we're starting with, right? And if a certain percent is just completely off the table, then what are we really missing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's That's where AI scares the shit out of me, honestly. As someone who cares so much about this issue, and I will say, right, 10 years in, there's been some tremendous progress. And I'm so proud of the Legal Revolution law firm that literally all we do is try to eradicate those criminal records through expungements, pardons, commutations, because these things haunt people. And now with the onset of AI, it's a whole other ballgame, right? Because I think one of the reasons that people can't move beyond their record is based on the onset of the internet and access to information. And so I think business owners aren't going to, I'm excited for what the innovation could be, because one thing that I will say scares me is that, it's from a process perspective and an operations perspective and an efficiency perspective, I understand why it's like we want to narrow from the outset. And criminal records is a really easy lever to pull. All I can say in response to that is you're missing out on some of the best workforce in the world. And that's not because these are folks who've, there's a lot of bias there. I think it's because of the people I've met and the people that I know and love who are I've also had, just like anyone, right? I have plenty of folks with criminal records and plenty of folks without criminal records who have been either really great employees or really terrible employees, and might say the same about me as a boss, right? But I just don't know that we can make everything that easy. I think we want to automate everything. And I think at the end of the day, my best recommendation is not something that maybe always lands very well. It's giving folks an individualized chance on, you can't, I think you have to see everyone as their own individual and hear and understand their unique backstory if there is a record. So I guess my only ask is please don't use criminal histories as a non-negotiable. If you want to inquire, I think depending on the state, there are ways to inquire at certain points in the process about a record, but to categorically exclude everyone with a record is perpetuating some real problems. I have to put a plug in for this when we talk about our collective landscape and safety. People who are categorically excluded, no matter what the identity issue is, get desperate and pissed and scared, and that doesn't create a really safe environment. I think I'd get pretty desperate and pissed and scared if I was excluded from every avenue I wanted to pursue. So I would also think about it from that, like, you'll feel it somehow, right? If we keep perpetuating some of these practices, it might not be in the immediate, but we all feel it. I think we're connected in that way. So yeah, not a simple answer to that one.
It's not, but it kind of opens the door. Like everyone's on their journey, right? But when I'm thinking from a business perspective, the business is also on a journey. And as you're building a workforce, there's a culture that gets established. And what I've found is most of the companies that grow the fastest, the leaders are focusing on that. And when they're talking about hiring, it's personality first. Like what are they like? What have they accomplished, struggled through, failed and succeeded with? Because that's part of the story and the struggle that's made them to who they are now.
Exactly.
Right. So when it's kind of learning the hard way is what my parents would call it. Like there's the easy way and the hard way. And the hard way was through punishment. But the hard way, those lessons are so deep and like visceral because they have to go through it, that from a personal development standpoint, which is kind of what entrepreneurship mimics a little bit, is that pressure that's put on an individual. It's different, but the growth that person has to go through, and if that can continue, like those people are like shooting stars. Like one of the fastest growing business owners that I know locally, he was incarcerated for a while. He came out and he couldn't find something to do. So he went and he just built it for himself.
It's a good way to circumvent the hurdles, right? Yeah.
But like not everyone can do that, right? Not everyone can be in the position and do what he did. Like his story is pretty awesome. He's one of the first people we had on the podcast, actually. But hope you're listening, Alosha. But that like how he approaches work, there's so much meaning because of like he knows how bad it can really be. Some business owners don't really know how bad it can really be. Like bad can be, oh, I can't make payroll. But that's a problem that some people never have the pleasure of even thinking about.
Totally.
I don't for a second want to suggest that my having majored in philosophy as an undergrad is a disadvantage in the way of that having a criminal record can be a disadvantage in the employment market. But I want to maybe broaden the conversation to the job market in general and recruitment in general to say that so often employers, those who are doing the recruiting, are looking for a specific thing on a resume. And sometimes it's a reason to rule somebody out, and sometimes it's a reason to rule somebody in. And that's sort of the way that machines think and the way that we're training AI to think, to just look for these keywords as a reason to rule somebody in or out. And I just want to suggest that students who are majoring in the liberal arts, for example, are often the best employees because, as we often have said over the years, they learn how to think broadly, holistically, and aren't just focused on a singular ability. So I advise a lot of business majors at St. Thomas, and I think that some of them are incredibly smart, incredibly accomplished, incredibly ambitious people, but they've majored in business for what I would call a functional purpose in order to help themselves get a job. Whereas those who are majoring in the liberal arts are doing so for what I would call a moral purpose, because there's just sort of an intrinsic reason that they're studying this discipline because it's interesting, even if it's not instrumentally useful. So when I got my job in a Big Four professional services firm, actually, this is a story I tell my students. I sent in 4 resumes before I got an interview. The first 3 were rejections because they weren't looking for philosopher on a resume. They had trained their recruiters to look for finance, accounting, that's it. And that wasn't me. So it was only through actually networking with somebody that I actually met at a conference that I actually got an interview. And then I did pretty well there. So long story short, I think that we have to get away from this binary thinking of in, out, based on criminal record, based on college major. We have to think broadly as recruiters so that our workplaces can actually beat AI by being more human places.
Such a good, I think of the rationally related. There's a really good test that, and that's where I so appreciate, Christopher, your ethical. How do you do this in an ethical way, right? It's okay to use automation. It's okay, but like, how do we do it ethically? And what is our responsibility, whether we're in the for-profit or nonprofit sector? And I think that that's such a key, like, you know, if you are looking for staff to employ a bank, perhaps someone with a money laundering background, it might not fit, right? And I know plenty of folks who spent time on the inside who are like, understood, right? Like that is rationally related to what I do. But for me, as someone who has witnessed and walked alongside amazing humans who are like, I am being denied a housing unit for something that has absolutely fundamentally nothing to do with the criminal background that I have, or I am being denied access to, you name the employment field. It's that's the sort of lever I think that creates such a widespread sense of defeat and despair when it's like, if I'm being denied things for something that I literally is not rationally related to who I am, what I can do, what I'm capable of, what I know, then what, right? So I really appreciate you bringing it back to the sort of like the why.
So right? Can I just say, who would have guessed that Emily Hunt Turner with an architecture and law degree would found a grilled cheese restaurant, right? But
not me.
But if you think about what went into the design of this grilled cheese restaurant, it was design, it was justice, and then your background makes perfect sense. But on the face of it, if somebody had to recruit for that position, they never would have.
True. Well, and honestly, Christopher, part of it was, well, if no one else is going to do it, damn it, we are. Like, exactly. Before we can do anything, we're going to practice what you preach. And I was a federal housing attorney for 5 years. And whether it be in the housing space or in the employment space, I've heard a million different, well, we can't because of our legal and our insurance and our policy. And it was like, well, if you aren't going to do it, then I am going to be one of the folks who will. And if I can figure out how to employ folks with a record and all the stigma that comes with it without resources, because I didn't have resources, then surely you can. So I think for me, it was also one of those like, well, if you're not going to do it, I'd like to spend my time doing it. And if it works, I'd like to spread the message, if you will.
Sounds like it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, people, like young people are having more of this conversation, and like, I feel like have popularized the conversation around purpose more, because like money isn't the only thing that's driving decisions and where they want to go work, especially coming out of COVID with all of that. So when the employer starts to look at that relationship with the team members they have more than, again, like a transaction, but hey, we're growing this company, and if you grow yourself while you're here at this company, the end result is the company is going to grow as well. But that now becomes a relationship that there's feelings and emotion, and you have to connect with that individual, and that type of organizational infrastructure isn't always there, or the soft skills required to be able to navigate some of that isn't there. And that's like employee handbooks and all that try to make it really cut and dry. We've redone ours a few times, and it's never cut and dry, right? It never is. Like
Totally.
Life is crazy, and people go through things, and it's about like drawing the line somewhere and really like trust in other people. But it's human to human interaction and being able to connect as somebody's growing. Like we brought on 5 new team members this week. They all came from very different backgrounds, and they're all going to be in very different places in 30 to 60 days at the company based off of what they commit to their learning and progress here. What's different from somebody who just was extra dumb at a certain point and got caught, and now there's something that's on the record? Like, is there research that goes into like the actual, like this, people in this category that are being limited for going into the workforce? Is there anything that is researching like over a few years, like there's this amount of people that actually have got fired or terminated for?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I actually think I'm going to quote Bruce Riley here, who's an amazing formerly incarcerated leader in New Orleans, running a giant enterprise there. And, you know, I think, I don't remember the data around it, but I think essentially, and Bruce is one of the first trained, he has a law degree from Tulane. That was a whole, I went to law school at Loyola, and he was at Tulane. And I remember when it came out, he's one of the several people who changed my life, having at that point never met anyone who was in prison. It's like murderer led into Tulane Law School. That was the title on the Times-Picayune and the New York Times and elsewhere. Anyway, you know, Bruce doesn't take shit really from anyone, and is not ashamed of his past. And I think will own his whiteness in that regard as to playing into some of that. That said, you know, he was when he got pushed back on, well, we can't hire you because legal, and he's like, show me one. I would like to see the case law on one situation where someone who is incarcerated was hired and they shot up the building, or, you know, like I'd like to see the case law on that, because of course his is related to violence, which let me be very clear, I don't take violence lightly. That said, I think we live in a violent culture and people make mistakes, and there's always circumstances, always, when violence takes place that feed into that situation. That said, I think that also helped me sort of help unpack some of my bias. I had it too. I mean, to sit here and pretend that I didn't have a bias, and probably still do have a bias that I will spend the rest of my life working through on many different forms of identities. You know, it really helped me, like, oh God, that's so, yeah. I mean, Bruce has never taken like, oh, please hire me despite my record. It was like, no, I've been through, like you said earlier, I've been through some stuff.
Yeah.
You want to hire me. No one will hustle harder than me. But I do want to mention one other thing, Matthew, because I think it's really, you're hitting on it. One of the first things that Christopher and I talked about over coffee, and I remember it's like, again, I became a new mom recently. I transitioned into a founder role for All Square. It's been this like very beautiful but emotional chapter of birth, rebirth, letting go, welcoming what's new. And so I was brought back to life in ways by many of our conversations, one of which was talking about like it is not easy to mix social well-being and running a business. It is the hardest thing ever. And I want to be so clear about that, because I think in the for-profit sector, folks get a really bad rep. And I think some folks have tried to do some things and have gotten burned for whatever that looks like, because HR is real and caring is hard, sadly, in the business sector. But it is possible. And I would also say in the nonprofit sector, right? I mean, I think it's one of the reasons I think we need to be much better resourced, because if anyone should have a strong HR backbone, it's nonprofit businesses, because we're not only running a business, we're running social programs where caring and developing and being in relationship is literally vital to the work. And yet everyone has to have boundaries. Everyone has to have policies and practices. And that's where I think Christopher and I have a really interesting, there's a sort of collaborative spirit between us, because we study and or engage in very different spaces, but they really pair well when it comes to like, it's one thing to talk about it, but it's another to try to do it. But we need both, right? Like we need folks who are talking about it and researching, how do we do this ethically, and what are the policies, and what does a responsible employee handbook look like? But I just wanted to say that because it is really hard. And any business owners that are going to try to care more, I just want to at least shout out that like you should do it. Absolutely. It's the right thing to do. And it's not easy.
It's not, but you can do it.
You can absolutely
You can't do it if on the Indeed thing you click boxes and it automatically excludes half the workforce. Maybe not half, right. But the fact that there's untapped potential out there that just doesn't even ever hit somebody's desk is absolutely fascinating to me. Like the money laundering guy, like from a business owner's standpoint, I'd be like, if this guy's actually made the progress and he could do that crap and get away with it for any period of time, like that guy's a highly employable individual if I can trust him. And he can like work within boundaries over time. Like, because that's the other side is,
it's a form of entrepreneurship.
Yeah,
right?
It really is. Like organized crime or crime in general, like they just approach problem solving from a way where they're rule breaking, and sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes it's
100%.
Ignorance of the rules or something like that.
Those skills with the right principles, principled leadership, right?
You always know how to you always come through
well,
in the
he is a philosopher.
Exactly.
So you're the first philosopher we've had on.
It's the skills.
And hopefully not the last.
No.
I have to say, at this point in my career, I'm better at talking about it than doing it. But I feel really lucky to be talking with doers about this. And, you know, that's what I do. I research and write about doers. And a little while back, you were talking about monetization. And in the nonprofit sector, monetization is sometimes a dirty word, but it's a necessary word in the for-profit sector. And I'm thinking, you know, it's a necessary word in the nonprofit sector as well. So I was referring to functional purpose and moral purpose a while back as it related to students' choice of major. I think where I first learned that distinction was in research about 9/11, actually. There's a firm in the World Trade Center called Sandler O'Neill, which lost many of its employees in the 9/11 attacks. And yet they survived. And a few years later, they hired a consultant to understand, how did we survive? By the way, Sandler O'Neill is now part of Piper Sandler, which is a Minneapolis-based finance firm. But at the time, it was independent. And what they found was that they'd always been really good at monetizing. That's what made them a successful investment bank on Wall Street. And that was their functional purpose. But post 9/11, they had a moral purpose to survive so that they could take care of victims' families. And that was sort of a higher reason for being than just maximizing value. And I think that's something that business and non-business enterprises have in common, that they should have a higher reason for being. And they should be really good at those functional things that enable that reason for being.
if you're good at filling a bucket up, then there's something in your bucket to give.
Yeah.
Right? And business owners can be really, really good at doing and taking action to generate revenue. And then once they've done that for a while, they feel unrewarded. Like money only serves so much, and then there's no purpose behind it, right? I've seen people that a lot of society would call successful that are absolutely depressed because there's no meaning behind what they're doing every day.
Yeah. But then there's the opposite side, Matthew, right? I think that's again where. So in my next life, I think I just landed on a name. I think I'm going to call it retrofit. But I think the concept is nonprofits have the right motivation, the best social leaders in the world, more hustle and ingenuity than anyone I've ever known when I look at all the people in the space. And yet our revenue model is broken. Like it's an unpredictable model. And there's so much that we need to do to think about how we're powered. And monetization is something that I think I'm so committed to. Like it lights me up in such a big way to help nonprofit leaders across the country not be afraid of monetization.
To make money?
To make money, because here's the thing.
Because it's bad. What the heck? How do you expect this to have any impact without money?
Right. And if you're not, like, because of how the sector is designed, which again, I had talked to Christopher's amazing mentor out in New York City about the design of the for-profit sector back to the charter is where you got to start if you really want to build in social DNA. The nonprofit sector, we don't have that issue. Social DNA is literally how we're designed. Awesome. But now we have to talk about how we're powered. Because if we don't have power behind the design, if we're not visible, if we don't have reach, we won't ultimately have the impact that we're capable of. And so I think for me, it's been in the space of be afraid of monetization, because you have all these social leaders, right, who know what monetization can do. But I'm like, listen, the sector is insulated from, we don't have shareholders. We don't have private equity. We actually can't have equity as founders. I don't have equity in Allsquare. It's a nonprofit. I can't cash out. I didn't cash out when I left. Like, I will never financially benefit from the brand, from the organization. It is community owned. It's a nonprofit, right? And so for me, but it can generate revenue. It can generate as much revenue as it wants.
And correct me if I'm wrong, like at the end of the day, if it is net positive, there just has to be those have to be directed towards impact.
Mission related. Exactly.
But that's what the heck a business does anyway.
Exactly. It all feeds back into the social programs. And so again, I think some of it is giving ourselves as in the sector permission to embrace some of these things, understanding the motivation behind them. You know, and that's a paradigm shift that just has to happen.
We're going to have another episode because we're getting to the end of this one. So before we wrap, can I just have y'all answer one more question? So it's a homegrown hustle. That's for the record, everybody. We've heard a few different iterations out there, but we've asked every guest that we've had on here what hustle means to them, especially like in terms of business. So if you could tell me what that word means to you, Emily, and then you can go next, Christopher.
You know, I think hustle to me, I want to be careful with how I say this, because I've also learned that being boundaried and being intentional about how you move and when you move is important. But I think of obsession, and I was recently listening to John Batiste, and he was saying, was it John? On a podcast recently, it was either him or his amazing wife, who had said, I'm not obsessed enough right now, and that's a problem. And I think that for me, when I'm obsessed, I know that hustle is going to be, I didn't hustle at HUD because no offense to HUD, I learned a lot of great things. It was truly, I really did. But I also wasn't activated in a way where I felt like I could do something that mattered. And so when that happens, when I think of hustle, I think of, for me, it comes out when I'm obsessed with something. It's usually when I'm obsessed, it's a pretty good indicator that I hope onto something worthwhile.
That was a good one.
A really good one. I was not a hustler until I moved to New York City. And then I realized if I was going to succeed there, I had to be a hustler. By the way, as we record this, the New York Knicks are ahead 2-1 in the NBA Finals. And I'm really excited.
And hell has not frozen over for the rest.
But my next book, also with Jen Toasty Harris, is on ambition. And I think of hustling as very much related to ambition. I have 3 ambitious kids, one who's applying to grad school, one who just landed at Disney World for the Disney College program,
Amazing.
and one who has 2 jobs and an internship and is insistent on going to a bigger city than this one for college. And I applaud that. But at the same time, I think too much hustle, too much ambition for its own sake can be a vice. And so we have to have ambitions. We have to hustle for the right things and make sure that the values that we're trying to serve are values that are not just instrumentally useful in order to make more money, get more famous, but actually make the world a better place. That's what we need to hustle for.
Agreed. I have to also throw this in as a Minnesota jock, big time. I would say to the New York Knicks the same thing I would say to Seattle Seahawks. You're welcome. Between Kat and Sam, it's like, is that a recipe now? Like you leave Minnesota and then you're going to go and win a Super Bowl, an NBA title.
I mean, the Twins have been doing
bullshit.
that for a while, so it's nothing new. Anyway, I didn't know sports was going to come up on this, but that's great. Christopher, I know you got to get going. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. We're going to have these guests back on. This was a really good conversation that I think has a lot more opportunity if we can carry it on a little bit further. So looking forward to that. Christopher, Emily, sincerely, thank you both for coming into the studio.
Matthew, thank you.
Really excited about what you both are working on. I'm going to pick up your books. You said you got another one coming out?
It's not coming out yet.
I'm not going to put a deadline on
early
you.
Stages, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, let me know when that does come out. But everybody, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all the support. Until next time, keep hustling. Hey, thanks for tuning into the Homegrown Hustle. It's been an honor to share the stories of local legends who make our community thrive. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Please stay tuned for more insight and inspiration. We got a lot of heat in the chamber. This is Matthew Eickman saying peace out until next time. Get hustling.